Welcome everybody, and thank you for your time this afternoon. This is the latest webinar, workshop that we're giving as part of the Early Warning Systems professional learning series that we've been doing with the Vermont Agency of Education. So Taisha, you want to hit the next slide for me? Just a very quick background and introduction to who we are as an organization. So folks on the call here that I'll introduce in just a minute from Resultant. So we are a Indianapolis-based data and technology consulting firm, but we certainly specialize in human-centered approach. You can see on the screen, our spiel about who we are and our outcomes, etc. But what I really want to drive home to folks on the call today is that we are not just technology practitioners, but we are also marry that with subject matter expertise, particularly in education. Our education group has been developing and growing over the past few years, been engaged with numerous Department of Educations across the country, and excited to be in front of the folks on the call here today. So Taisha, you want to hit the next slide? And so myself, just introduce the folks on the call real quick. So you'll hear just a little bit from myself at the beginning here and at the end. So my name is Peter Anderson. I'm the business manager as part of this professional workshop series. You'll be hearing from Taisha, our subject matter expertise. She is our early warning systems guru who will be guiding us through this workshop today. So yes, take a bow. And also on the call, this is Latika. She is our solutions architect and also technical advisor on this project. You may hear a little bit from her today as well. And then also, I believe Holly is here. Hey, Holly. I wasn't sure if we were going to have you on the call today, but definitely happy to have you here. And Holly is a data analyst here at Resultant too. So Taisha, we'll get the next slide. Okay, and we're not sure how many we're going to have, but yes, we would like all of you all to introduce yourselves very briefly. So please just come off mute. We'll take it in turns. I can shout out names. Please introduce yourself, your SU or SD, and then your role as well. So Matthew, as our first attendee, do you mind kicking us off here?
Sure. Matthew Fetters, Central Vermont Supervisory Union, and I'm the school superintendent.
Perfect. Thank you. Noah.
Hi, I'm Noah Everett. I am at South Burlington High School, and I work with youth engagement in our learning center.
Awesome. Thank you, Noah. Colleen.
Hi, I'm Colleen Cowell. I work for Burlington School System, and I'm the lead instructional coach.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Sabrina? Oh, Sabrina, you're on mute.
I see that. I am at Burlington School District. I'm the interim principal at Burlington High School.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. And Bethany?
Hi there. I'm at Rutland City Public Schools in Rutland, Vermont, and I am the data manager here.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. You want to hit the next slide, Taisha? I'm going to pass it over to Taisha now, but just before I do, I want to say thank you and welcome to everybody. Your engagement throughout the workshop today will be greatly appreciated. Taisha will go into some details on that as well, but definitely want to get conversation going, get input from all of you on today's call. And now I will zip it and be quiet. And Taisha, the show is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Peter, I think I need to get a shirt that says Early Warning Guru. I think that I have earned that title now. But again, thank you so much for the warm welcome. And again, as Peter stated, thank you so much for being here this afternoon with us. We are going to just have some open conversation around early warning systems and how to create a team to support the implementation of that system for your respective SU or SD. I come to the table with years of experience as a classroom teacher, as a school administrator, as a system level administrator, as well as having experience working at the State Department of Education here in the great state of Georgia. So we are calling from all parts of the nation and are so very glad to be here with you. Today. As you see here on the agenda, there are essentially three main things that we're going to cover. The first is establishing the EWS team. The second is defining appropriate indicators. And lastly, we'll leave you with some additional resources, and hopefully you'd be set up for success for the next steps for your respective location. Hey, Ryan, thanks for being with us. And we do have, we'll get you in a second for your introduction, Ryan, because it's going to be in the next slide. So really quickly, as Peter mentioned, that participation is so greatly appreciated. And not only is it appreciated, it will be rewarded today. And we're using that word loosely. We just like to just honor you guys for being here, as well as just say thank you for making this an engaging experience for us all. As I mentioned, I'm a former teacher and administrator, and we like to get that feedback. So thumbs up are always wonderful. Coming off of your chat and communicating with us, coming off of mute, excuse me, or even typing things in the chat are all appreciated. And for that, your name every single time that you participate will be entered into this amazing wheel of names that we have here. And at the end, we will spin our wheel, and our lucky winner will receive an Amazon gift card. Can you get excited about that? Can we get some reactions in the chat already? I see smiles. I'll take those too. Yes, let's get some pom-poms if I had them with me. I'm a former cheerleader as well, so I left them somewhere in the house. But yes, thank you. Peter, capture all of that. This is going into the wheel already. So you guys are amazing. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, who's going to just provide some more context as to why are we even all on this call as it relates to the great work that you do in Vermont each and every day. Over to you, Ryan.
Hi, folks. Ryan Parkman from the Agency of Education. I'm on the personalized learning team, so I get involved with a lot of things that are student-centered learning. I really love the early warning systems because when I was an administrator, we'd always want to know, how do we identify what students are in need of additional supports? It's not always just the students who may fail a class. That's like being reactionary. It's like, what are some of those indicators that might be pointing to the area that a student is in academic trouble? Is it their attendance? Is it their behavior? Are there some other social emotional factors? What are those types of things that we might be able to use to identify those students who need help before it's a reaction? We want to be proactive. And that's just really, I think, is at the heart of an early warning system. And these things tie in with, part of your local comprehensive assessment system. Are you doing universal screening for your SEL in addition to your math, your ELA? How are you recording those things in your student information system so that data can be easily accessible? And it involves right in with your coordinated curriculum. Are you putting in SEL teachings along with your academic? Are you doing, it's just, it overflows and overlaps with so many other different areas that I just think it's really crucial that, that a school has some type of a early warning system. And then also part B is that it goes beyond those A, B's, and C's of an early warning system, the attendance, behavior, and competence. Just working to have a rich, robust early warning system that can really help a school deploy the necessary interventions to the students to optimize the success of our students. So I'm really glad that folks are here and working to develop their early warning systems in their school systems. And and I also, it says right there in the blue, district oversight. We also want to make sure that it's not good things are just happening in one school. We want to make sure it's for all schools. We want them for all schools in the state, but definitely if we're within the district, we want to make sure every student in our district are getting the same equitable opportunities. I think I hit pretty much everything there. And folks can feel free to reach out to me with any questions at any time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ryan. So we'll jump right into an overview of what an early warning system is. There is content here on the slide, of course, but I'm not going to read it verbatim. What I want you to take away from this slide is that the early warning system is definitely a way to establish routines for our educators to support students that may need that additional support based on indicators that we'll talk about later. But it is not a tool that's intended to be utilized in isolation of the other amazing work that you're already doing. So this is what the Venn diagram represents. At the core of it, it's all about what are we doing to support our students, and that may look differently in our efforts, such as if we're focusing on behavior, well, then there are behavioral interventions that are specific to PBIS. There are multi-tiered supports that are more academic focused that fall under the MTSS, but there are also interventions that cross paths with the PBIS as well as MTSS. Essentially, those roll into your early warning system. So they're all really intended to be linked systems to identify and support those students who need additional support. So all in all, this isn't just one more thing, using air quotes here, isn't one more thing on our educators' plates. So before we even talk about the team structure, before we get into indicators and just other elements of implementing an EWS, let's just talk about really quickly, is your SD ready for an early warning system? And what that really takes into account are two phases that I'm going to break apart and talk about on each slide. So the very first thing that you would want to ensure that you're doing is answering the question, what are your schools or your district's top 3 challenges? 3 is a very manageable number. There may be some beyond that, but for presentation's sake, 3 again is a very manageable number. So, and when we break that number down and categorize it by student characteristics, we're looking at attendance, we're looking at behavior, and we're looking at their course performance. And looking at those 3 buckets, then you take that a step further to answer the question that you see here, will address what you see here, and that's determining that percentage or that account of students that fall into either of those respective categories. That's the very first thing, because everything else is the actions, all of that will be based upon that goal or that number that is at the central focus of the efforts and work that you're doing. So in some instances, flying the plane while you're building it is okay, not when it comes to being proactive and assigning interventions for students or catching them even before they get off track. The second leg of this is now, once we've identified those pool of students that are within each of those 3 categories, now we can make the determination as to what type of team we need. I will say this, we're going to dive a little bit more into these 3 bucketed teams that you see here in the middle, ad hoc, school integrated team, or a distributed team, but that is based upon the number of students that were in the count from the previous slide. So that's a check of, let's just ready ourselves for the work ahead before we even ask the first person to be a part of our team. There are foundational steps that we need to take. So now let's get into the nitty gritty. You should have already received a tool from Peter, and it looks very much like what you see here in this screenshot. And that tool is intended for you to use in this presentation, in this workshop with us today. Again, we want this to be interactive. We understand you will not leave with a full plan, but what you will leave with are steps to take back to your respective planning team to keep the conversation going. So it's not just a sit and get, it's a sit, get, and participate, ask questions, and then actually make the best use of your time as you're able to start answering some of these questions now. So if you don't have that document, please feel free to let us know in the chat, and we'll make sure that you do have it. So you can take a second now to go into your emails and pull that up so that you can have it, because it will be a working document for you as we progress through the workshop. Give you a little bit of time to do that. I knew I left something. My elevator music, Peter. All right. Uh, I see people moving around, so I think that they are getting that document pulled up. So I think we're good to go. So let's roll on. I did not get. Okay, Colleen, thank you for letting us know. We'll take care of that for you. The work of developing a team is not solely one step. It's all a part of the full implementation process. So what am I trying to say? When you're implementing your tool, there are other considerations to keep in mind. The team itself, what are you going to do with the data from the tool? Who needs to be empowered to use it? How will the data be used? How are we going to evaluate this entire process? So that's the vantage point at which we are approaching today's training. So there are 4 steps as part of the implementation process. It doesn't matter where you are in your your implementation phase. You could already have a fully functioning tool. You could be at the very beginning where you're thinking about and implementing a tool in your system or your school. It's okay. All of this is relevant to the steps that you are currently on or whatever is next for you. The first step in implementing that team, the tool, I'm sorry, is to establish your team. Once and we'll go into what the team is responsible for. So once the team is established, then we need to start identifying those indicators. Then we move into mapping those interventions to student needs, and then we round this out and with evaluating student progress and intervention effectiveness. Now, there's going to be a lot of information that we have to present to you in 90 minutes. So hold on to your seats, go on for a ride, but it is really, really good stuff. So we're going to, today we're going to focus on steps 1 and 2. I'm going to put in a shameless plug for workshop 2, which is going to cover steps 3 and 4. So again, for today, just steps 1 and 2. Step 1 is focusing on that team, and the essential questions that we're going to answer today, or you should be able to answer after leaving this workshop, is who should be at the table? And what are they going to be responsible for? What is the right approach to all of this, making it make sense? And just really, who are the right people that need to make this happen? Then another piece of the team for step 1 and all the work involved with that is determining the cadence. So how much time should we meet for? And what that looks like is determining your goals for the team, what is the right frequency, the right duration, and we'll give you some suggestions on that. So again, 2 essential questions: who should be at the table and how much time should we meet for? Okay, so our EWS responsibilities. I hope you like the graphics. I worked very, very hard on it. It took a lot of work. How can I make this make sense? And so we have it visualized here for you. Doesn't matter if this is going to be a school team, doesn't matter if this will be a district team. The responsibilities are very similar. At a 30,000-foot view, the responsibilities of the team are to identify the school-wide or the district-wide trends, and of course that involves looking at data on a consistent basis. Then we're going to take a few layers down and go to a 15,000-foot view, and that's where you're starting to identify the students who may need support and determine their intervention levels. Then there's work that's in the weeds. That's the boots on the ground work that the team has to do. And essentially, that is assigning and implementing interventions to monitor student progress. So it's a tiered approach to what the responsibilities look like. Now we're going to take it a step further and get more detailed about what that 30,000-foot view looks like at the district, looks like at the school, and looks like as a mixed review. So as a mixed team, so as a district level team, this is at a 30,000 view. The responsibilities look as defining EWS indicators and the appropriate interventions for all schools in the district. That's for all schools. So that of course means that you need to have access to all school data. And we'll get more to talking later in the conversation about what types of data you should be looking at. But your team is going to consist of district and perhaps even building level administrators, because it's still important to have that perspective from the school. I know I've mentioned earlier that I've been a school administrator, district administrator, as well as worked at the state. And sometimes when we're at different levels in our different levels in our career paths, you could just get so far away from the school that you just really forget what that experience is like, or you're not as in tune or as close to that work. So you need someone who's there with you to bring those perspectives to the tables that you're just not a part of anymore. And so the district level will also have a strong sense of centralized control of some of those school processes. So ultimately, the district is going to govern the team responsibilities for that district. So this is the approach at which you want to focus your attention on, or approach this workshop. If you're sitting in a position where a district team might be the approach for you, then you'll look at everything else that we're going to talk about today from a district approach. For the school level team, responsibilities at a 30K view look as such. Each building has a team to carry out this work independently from the district. So there are school-specific, local discretionary tasks that need to happen at the school, because our needs may be very, could be distinct from what the district at large needs to be focusing on. Where our reports might look slightly different, again, because that's with the local discretion and what our school needs to be looking at. The team level, the school team level, is also going to include teachers or other interventionists that may not be appropriate for a district level team. So if you're approaching this from a school positioned role, then this would be the approach that you would likely be a part of. And then there is a mixed team, which could include both school level, district level team, where a district level personnel may meet regularly with the established team at the school level. So there's district in isolation, there's an independent school level approach, and then there is a mixed team approach that combines both district and school level individuals. Looking at this from a 15K view at the district level, I'm not going to read all of these bulleted items here. This just goes a little bit, gets closer to the weeds of what the district would focus on. And so now when you're talking about, again, district level, we have more governance over allocating resources for the district. We have more power, if you will, to have programs that touch all schools across the district. So for example, I actually was a part of a district level data team that I created for the district that I worked for at the time. And we were able to implement different intervention programs at schools based on a need, but that's coming from sitting at the district level. Then at a 15K view, now as a school, you're closer to the students now. So your decisions and your tasks and responsibilities are going to, again, be a little bit closer to the actual direct student needs. So that could look like looking at more school level schedules and assigning those interventions that are specific to your location and your location only. And what is important for your school level and your district level, I cannot emphasize this enough, that you must receive professional development, and today's workshop is one of those steps along the way. So there should be continued professional development around this topic, because there's so many moving pieces to it, and we're just going to talk through as many of them as we can today. All right, so we're going back. This visual here is taking us back to a few slides ago when I presented the horizontal graphic, and now this is the right side of this. And I told you we'd come to it at some point. Getting a little bit more specific here on what the differences are at the team. So this is what getting into the weeds at the team level looks like. There are three possible teams that you could have at the school level. The first being your ad hoc team, and that looks like a team that's only focused on 1 to 25 students. How do I know my number? Because I've already done the calculation from the other side of that horizontal graphic. I know you can't remember it verbatim. You will see it again, but so we've already calculated our numbers because we've identified those three primary areas of challenge for our school, whether it's attendance, behavior, or course performance. So if I have 1 to 25 students that fall within this category, whether by count or by percentage, and I just really need an ad hoc team. And that ad hoc team is going to look like someone who's our point person who pulls in school staff and outside resources as necessary. So if the students in this particular group, if the focus is on attendance, then an ad hoc point of person may work very closely with the attendance clerk or the school counselors to assign and monitor the interventions that are specific to attendance. But let's just say we run our numbers and our numbers yield a result of 25 to 50 students, then we really need an integrated school level team. And that's going to include teachers, counselors, maybe social workers, and most definitely the school administrator. It's critically important now because we're talking about a larger group of students, and within that larger group, there may be a variation of challenges that this group of students need. So it's important that we have the right people on the team to ensure that the students' needs are being addressed in a timely manner and specific to what the data is suggesting are the actual needs for those students. And then there is a distributed teacher team. Now we're talking about a pretty large group of students. And so now it may involve your grade level or content specific teams that identify those students that are in tier 1 through tier 3 interventions. This is speaking more specifically to MTSS. So that could look like if we're focusing, let's just say, course performance was one of our challenges. Our data may reflect that students are not performing where they're performing below expectations in math and reading. So on a distributed teacher team, we would want to ensure that the appropriate educators for those respective subjects are represented on that team. And now we've come to a place where you actually get to pull out that document. And I think by now everyone has received a copy of it. We're good to go. In the first row, you're just going to, you should be able to write in what approach will you work on today. That's the first. So am I approaching this the way that I'm tuning in? Am I approaching it as a district level team might be appropriate for me? Then there's a school. Or should I be thinking about a mixed team approach? If at the school level, you may think, okay, I think that we may need an ad hoc or maybe an integrated. And you might not know specifically because you don't have your data in front of you, but this is for the purpose of getting conversations started and continuing the work when you move back, when you go back to your locations. But you may know, most of us are pretty familiar with our data, so we should have some idea. Okay, now we're going to move forward and talk about how to identify the right people. So to date, or to time, we have established if we're ready, we know what approach we're going to take. Now we just have to think about, who do I need on my team? Who are my dream team players? Here are just some. This list is not exhaustive. This is just a few of the most important characteristics that you want to ensure are included on your team. You got to have the right people surrounding you, right? I mean, my hometown is Cleveland. I understand why LeBron had to make the decision that he made to leave Cleveland and go to, where did he go? LA to win a ring. He had to position himself for the dream team. So it's the same thing here. We need people on the team with the technical skills to utilize the tool, because at some point there will need to be training. Somebody needs to know how to run different reports and just know the technical nuances of a team and work on that back end. Not me, but somebody needs to know how to do it that's on my team. You need the knowledge, someone who has the knowledge of students who are receiving special services or who need that additional support. You will want to think about your team members who has experience with the MTS or PBIS, or who's the coordinator of these intervention programs. Someone who's very familiar with evidence-based interventions, whether that's a classroom teacher or interventionist. Someone who has knowledge of students, different students' backgrounds, who's data literate. And you may even want to consider a district representative, especially if you have a mixed team. And that's the approach that you're taking for your respective location. Don't get overwhelmed if you can't think of anybody right now who fits the bill for these different categories right here. It's okay. This is just for you to think about, and this may also prompt some conversations about resourcing and are there roles that we need to consider in order to ensure that this tool is being implemented and used with fidelity and in the best way possible. So it's okay, we'll get there, but start thinking about from this perspective, at least with these few skill sets here. Don't get overwhelmed. It's a lot of text here. It's okay. You're going to see it and reference it later when you get this presentation. But this slide is intended for you to digest once you have this in front of you. And here are specific roles and responsibilities that are associated with these typical roles. And at the end of the day, essentially, you want to make sure that you do have a program coordinator, because that is what, and that program coordinator could wear multiple hats. So it could also be your school level leader. So these are the more essential roles that would need to be included on your team, especially at the school level, and if you have a mixed approach. So again, it's also to prompt conversations. Do we have the right people? Do we have these roles? And if we don't have these roles, we probably should consider them. I don't know that a data coach is a role that you see that's fully integrated in schools in Vermont, but from my experience here in Georgia, that is a role that at one point was not a salaried one, but we did associate it. We did create this position, and we were able to offer credits for recertification and or professional development credits, and the teachers appreciated that as well. And it was also attached to leadership opportunities that we offered for teachers who were interested in advancing in their career to become an administrator or maybe work at the district office at some point. So you can think about it from that perspective too. Now I'm going to take about a minute to think about the roles that I just presented. Who needs to be on your team? Who can you think about that would really serve your team well? Who are your dream team people? You can think about that. You can type it in. You can write it in, or you may have already been thinking about that, which is a great thing as well. So give me just 30 more seconds, maybe to just jot down some folks. I have a dream team here with Resultant on this project. I mean, Peter is my point guard, Holly is my center. I think Liz Latika hit my power forward. So we have a dream team here, y'all. So you got to think about who is your dream team for the work that you're doing. Okay, and it may change. It's all right. It's okay. We're thinking about some people now. All right, thank you for letting us know. Okay, SMART goals. Who's familiar with SMART goals? I have to give you an opportunity to earn your spot on the wheel. SMART goals. Yep, I see a thumbs up. Here we go. Head nod. Peter, you getting these people? They're like, yeah, I like the wheel. She said the wheel. She got to put my name on it. So we're here. Yes, yes, yes. See it? Thank you. SMART goals. Tell you what, we probably won't need to spend too much time here on SMART goals. This is a term that is not foreign to educators, but it is important to establish SMART goals for your team at the onset of this work. Now, when I talk about SMART goals, I'm not talking about it from looking at student data as the team is progressing throughout the year. This is a SMART goal for your team. So once your team convenes, so I'm going to take you back to, I know that it's slide 9. You don't know that, but going back again to the slide that had the horizontal visual there. On the left-hand side, we first started talking about the attendance, behavior, and the course performance, and you're calculating the numbers of students that fit into those respective categories. That is the data that you are using to establish or determine or define your SMART goal for your team. Before we even get into any other data that the tool itself is going to push out. This is a SMART goal for your team. So when you're thinking about SMART goals really quickly, we know that the S is for specific. It has to be specific. So what will the goal do? Who will carry it out? It has to be measurable. How will you know that you've achieved that goal? So consider a tangible measurement. Is it achievable, or some people like to say attainable? Potato. It's the same thing. Is the goal achievable? Given your time frame, is it a reasonable expectation or an outcome? Again, within that time frame. Relevant. Is it linked to the purpose of your tool? So if your tool is designed to determine which students need additional support because maybe they're not on track to graduate on time, or maybe they're not on track to have post-secondary success, well, is that goal relevant to the purpose of the tool? We're going to do an exercise to help bring all of this together. And then lastly, is it timely? So how often will we need to do this task? When will the goal be accomplished? These are the types of questions that you're asking when you are developing SMART goals. You will receive the SMART goals template at the end of our presentation. So you will have something to help guide the development of a fully thought out SMART goal for your team. But for the moment here, we're going to take some time and work through a SMART goal together. What you see here on the screen at the very first sentence is a very simple goal. Third grade students will improve their language conventions writing scores. It lacks a time frame. It lacks being measurable. So there are a few other things. So what I like to do now, and we're going to take a few minutes and do this together. And don't forget, this is your opportunity to get your name added to the wheel of names. We'll work through it together. We'll start with specific. What I like for you to do is either come off chat, off mute. I don't know why I keep saying off chat, but off mute, or put in the chat a statement about for the goal to be specific. So remember, when you're talking about being specific, you're answering the question, what do we want to achieve? When do I need to achieve it? And why is this goal, come on mouse, why is this goal important? So we want, how can we start to get specific with this goal? Who are we even talking about here? Anyone dare to be bold? No right or wrong answers here. Yes, awesome. I love it. Yes. She gets 3 names on the spinner for being the first one. Yes, yes, yes. All right. I'm going to help us out here. I love it. We're getting there. So let's do it together. No problem. So here's a way that we can start getting specific from this very simple goal. Who are we talking about here? 3rd grade students. And what are they going to do? They're going to improve their language conventions by 7 percentage points. We're getting there, but it's still missing some components of it. Measurable. Now we're throwing in, well, what is our baseline? And then from our baseline, we know where we're trying to get to. So even though I'm getting more specific and I said 7 percentage points, I still don't know what the baseline is. I still don't know what the ultimate goal is here. Then how do we know if it's attainable? Well, if they met or if they've gotten to the 7 percentage points, then I know that we've met our goal. But is 7 percentage points reasonable, attainable, achievable in a school year? It absolutely is. So we don't want to be too far-fetched with our goals or with our expectations with writing our goals. Relevant. And 3rd grade students will improve their language convention writing scores per whatever assessment we're using to measure, and then by a time frame. So putting it all together, here's one that I have ready for us. By May 2024, my 3rd grade students will improve their language conventions writing score by 7 percentage points from 63% to 70% proficient. So that's a long way from 3rd grade students will improve their language conventions writing scores. So again, you'll have this template for you to use. And where did I get this data from? Of course, I made it up, but you would get your data from looking at your school-wide or your district-wide data to, again, identify 1 to 3 of your challenge areas, whether they're in the bucket of attendance, behavior, or course performance. Not going to actually do this right now, but this is a question for you to take back to your team to further develop what is your team's SMART goal. And we are at a point where you get to take a 2-minute stretch break. I know you need it because it's a lot of information. So we'll take a 2-minute stretch break and we'll start back at 2:48. Okay, so as a recap, so far we've identified whether we're going to pursue a school level or district level approach. We've already started to think about who are the right people for my dream team. And we are now getting ready. Oh, and we've also talked about SMART goals. And so we are going to get this template. It's amazing. It's going to help you identify. It's going to help you identify your goal for next steps with your team. So now we're going to hop into talking about the meeting cadence and how often you should meet and what that looks like. So the team, it is suggested that your team meets at least 4 times in the school year. And for each of those checkpoints throughout the year, you see a couple of bulleted items that suggest the activities that should take place. So at the beginning of the school year, or as close to the beginning of the school year as possible, you want to make sure that you start establishing the team and the team norms. So this takes place during pre-planning or right at the very beginning. So everything that we've been talking about, that should occur at that moment. You also want to engage in professional development around the team in the implementation process, a part of what you're doing today. And those first 20 to 30 days of school, that's a very critical moment in time for the implementation process, because this is now where you're going to start reviewing and interpreting that data. We will talk more about how to interpret and analyze data in our next workshop, because remember, this is the 2 workshops. It's going to cover 2 different steps in each workshop. And so the next leg goes into what to do with the data. Now we're just getting you set up for success. So in the first 20 to 30 days, this is the most critical stage really here, because now we're looking at the data, we're determining which students fall into these respective categories. And these are the students that we need to start implementing those interventions. We're starting early. It's hence an early warning indicator system. So we're starting this work very early on at the beginning of the school year so that we can be intentional about the timeline and the benchmarks and our checkpoints throughout the school year. So we're being proactive, not reactive. Another time that it's suggested that you meet or convene is after each grading period. So during this time, you're going to monitor those students' responses to the interventions that were put in place, be it for attendance, behavior, course performance. And so we're monitoring, we're having discussions about, well, which interventions were put in place, how effective are they, and how do we know that they're working? And if they're not working, then we need to implement different interventions. But it needs to be after a period of time in which a student has been able to engage with that particular intervention. And then at the end of the school year, we're still making revisions. We're going to revise the intervention plan. We're going to make plans for summer. We're going to make plans for the next school year. And we're just going to essentially evaluate the entire EWS process. And that is from ensuring that we did have the right people on the team. Are there others that we realize at the end of the school year that we probably could have benefited from having on the team? Are there changes to our reports? Are there different data that we should be collecting? And then again, how do we know that our interventions work? Are there new interventions that we need to consider, or interventions that we need to remove from our menu because they just weren't good interventions? So you'll have all of this nicely packaged with a little more meat to it in the slides that follow here. As you're going through this presentation, you'll notice that some of the activities from the beginning of the year to the first 20 to 30 days to after each grading period are repetitive. It's intentional and it's showing the progression of the work, but it's also showing that there are things that are consistently that should be done consistently across the school year. There are a few things that I've highlighted in bold text that will change, and that's simply because of the timing that it falls within the school year. So you'll have this to reflect on. I'll give an example. Well, actually, these are 2 that I've already pulled to the slide that we just spent some time on with the graphic. So we've talked about some of this already, but moving on to, this is what a meeting that takes place in one of those intervals looks like. And it's just a simple and sample agenda that you have here. So you're going to spend about 5 minutes doing your overview. You may need to revisit something that you left off at the last meeting. Maybe you're reviewing your norms. Those are the logistical types of things that you're doing there. Then you want to move into discussing student data. It is suggested about 4 to 7 minutes per student. So where I have 25 minutes here, that is likely going to change. Then we may want to move into announcements and then share successes. So that's one way to learn if these interventions are working and how students are responding to those interventions. Moving on, now you can write on your sheet, as we've been talking through it, how often do you feel that your team will need to meet? You know, your schedule is obviously a lot better than we do. So you're thinking about, even now, how often should we meet? Does it make sense for us to meet at the beginning of the school year? It absolutely does. But where would we fit that in? So think, where does your pre-planning begin? Is that at the end of July, beginning of August? Do you already, as a district or a school, have other meetings that need to be considered? Or that may typically be in place? You're infusing those EWS meetings into those. If not 20 to 30 days, maybe for you, it needs to be advanced to every 15 days. There's no right or wrong. These are just suggestions, but you can at least start thinking about how often your team needs to meet. So I gave it 30 more seconds to just jot down some notes about that.
Hey, Taisha, really quick.
Yes.
We have a question in the chat. I wonder if we
Yes,
could
just open
address.
that up. While they would get, thank you, Peter. Looking
Good
at that
question.
now. That's a great question. Thank you so much. So it is not to be considered a separate body necessarily. It will be at local discretion. But I'll take us back to the visual that you saw at the beginning of the presentation, where we had the early warning system, PBIS, SST or MTSS. Your EST can fit nicely into that graphic as well, because none of your teams are intended, as it pertains to student, anything dealing with student interventions is not intended to work in silo, and it shouldn't. So the work that the EWS team could be married very nicely with your EST. I would suggest that, going back to one of the earlier slides, so we're determined, should this be an ad hoc team? Should this be an integrated team? And it's based on the numbers. So if some of this work that your EST is already doing, they could very well also serve in the seat of the early warning team. And I certainly hope that makes sense. So you can leverage an existing team for your early warning. You would just have to be clear that when you're meeting, that a portion of your meeting time is going to be very specific for early warning, and where there can be overlap, that may be appropriate. Yes, just thought, yeah, keyword, yeah, there could definitely be some overlapping of membership, because I'm assuming, at least in my experience, for example, MTSS teams, there's generally school level oversight there. There would generally be a school interventionist on that team as well. So absolutely, you definitely have to consider the resources that you have. And kind of going back to what I mentioned earlier, that you're not going to leave this workshop with a fully developed plan, but what you will leave here with is some food for thought, and it's some content and context to engage in additional conversation outside of here. So that could look like resourcing, that could look like, how will we fit this into our schedule? Do we really have the right people? Do I have a data coach? Do we have an IT person? Who in our school can manage this tool? Who can serve as a technical person? How engaged is our school counselor already across these, across the different programs that we have? What additional professional development do we need? So definitely some potential overlapping in membership, and there is definitely local discretion as to whether you should or can leverage any existing groups or teams that you already that are already convening to talk about data and intervention. So great question. This is another tool that you're going to receive, and it is a spreadsheet. It's going to help you organize the interventions that you currently have access to or currently using at this moment. And it's just helping you to categorize them into buckets of attendance, behavior, and course performance by the tier. And you're putting in notes about how the availability of those interventions, basically, which students will those interventions be best suited for. So for example, if we're looking at attendance, for your students at tier 1, which we generally say are all students, you have automatic calls that go out for that relate to attendance. So if any student is absent, maybe there is a robocall that goes out after 10 a.m. But then students who are at your tier 2 may need a little bit more attention in the attendance area. So they're going to get 2 calls of that. So we're looking at about 100 students per. There should be 2 calls, I'm sorry. So they're going to get 2 calls throughout the week or throughout the month, whatever the cadence might be for you. Tier 3 students, once you've hit a certain threshold, now we need to have a parent conference. Your parent needs to come in, we need to talk about this, and we need to get the student back on track. So this just helps you to catalog those interventions and be clear about for which students they are best suited for. We are finally into step number 2, and this is defining appropriate indicators. This won't take us we're nearing our time, so I promise I will be able to get it all in, and we'll still have time for questions. This segment is a little bit shorter. So when we talk about indicators, we're specifically going to focus on attendance, behavior, and course performance. Why? Because research has found that those indicators that are within those 3 buckets are very well established and have been verified through research studies as early as the 1990s to be strong in predictors of determining if a student is on track to graduate from school on time or to drop out of school before they reach graduation. So what does attendance look like? Absenteeism, whether that's excused or unexcused. It looks at tardiness. Behavior, we're talking about office referrals, suspensions, expulsions, classroom behavior grades. Course performance, grade point average, standardized test courses, credits, course performance, 3rd grade literacy. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just a few of the different data points within each bucket of ABCs. Now, 3rd grade literacy, that's really a new one because early research really only looked at high level indicators and those that were across grades 6 through 12. But now I'd say within the mid 2000s, we started to look at 3rd grade literacy and the proficiency on state standardized assessments. And what this is, it's not saying that, I'll say it this way. Some people have concern that looking at elementary school is just way too early to determine if a student is on track to graduate on time. I won't agree or disagree, but I will say that data has shown that if a student by 3rd grade has not demonstrated literacy, that student is off, not necessarily on the right track to graduate on time if interventions are not put in place, if support is not put in place to right that student and get them back on the track and increase and improve their literacy proficiency. So there is value add in looking at student performance as early as elementary school. And it's not that, it's okay to look at kids that early on. We're not making a definitive determination about the student. And that's at any grade level. So just because the tool says that at 30 days, Taisha has missed 7 days of school and this is the threshold that she is, it doesn't mean that she's absolutely off track. It just means that if Taisha's attendance is not corrected, if she does not turn the tide, she's likely not going to graduate on time. So this tool is not the end all be all. This tool is to be used formatively, not summatively. So yes, there are behaviors that we should be looking at as early as the elementary level, because and all of us most of us are educators on the call. We know that there are certain behaviors that do travel with students across the grade bands if there's no intervention. And it does start for some students at elementary. Here are just a few other indicators that have been found to be strong predictors toward that potential that educational outcome. So we're looking at student engagement, student mobility, even social emotional learning is a new buzzword in the early warning space. There's very little research on it now, but there are more schools and districts that are looking into this data. A lot of that really surfaced after COVID hit. That's when we really started to look at the students' social emotional learning status. And now you'll see that some tools are actually considering that data as a metric for their tool. And that's by way of a survey that asks questions about to measure the student's social emotional status. So that's there's the research is growing in this area. Really quickly, when we're talking about indicators, we want to make sure that whatever your tool is using as the data, that it's a really great indicator and it points toward action. So making sure that I'm going to read starting at valid and going around my circle here. So whatever indicators we're using for our tool, be it at the district or the school level, is it valid? Does it measure what is intended to measure? So if we're looking at attendance data, is the data that we're feeding our tool actually attendance data? Is it being recorded accurately? Are teachers being held accountable, or are our attendance clerks being held accountable for ensuring accuracy in our records? That's important because the output is only going to be as good as what? The input. Is the data reliable? Is it going to produce consistent measures over time? Is the data predictive? Another way to think about it being predictive is it timely? So is it going to help us make informed decisions in that moment so that we can be proactive in our efforts and not wait until the last minute? And is it going to be actionable? Will this data help us to do something to help that student get back on track? So is it relevant to the issue in question? If your issue in question, going back to that SMART goal, is to focus on attendance, are we using the right indicators for addressing the area of concern with attendance? If it's behavior, are we looking at the right behavior metrics? If it's course performance, are we looking at the right course performance indicators to get us to the point of achieving that SMART goal that we set out for our team based on data that we use to derive that goal? Local discretion is important. What this means, you can have two different schools within the same district. One school, their tool may need to be adjusted so that the indicators are more specific and relative to that particular environment. I'll give you an example as we talk about indicators on this slide. Behavior. I'm going to break this down. If we're looking at behavior data, the threshold here is that point that says this student is going to be flat because they missed a certain amount of days or because they have a certain amount of behavior referrals. So we're talking about behaviors in this example that I'm getting ready to give. Two schools, same district. If I am an alternative school, If my students receive 2 or more behavior referrals because of that environment, that would not necessarily be an appropriate cut point or a comparative cut point for another school, because at the behavior at a alternative school, we know that we're going to see behavior referrals likely more often than I would at a traditional school. So that cut point or that threshold might look a little bit differently, and that is okay. If you're at 2 schools, same district, maybe one school has higher mobility rates, transient population, their threshold might just be a little bit higher before a student is flagged. And that is okay as well. So just as when we are comparing data and we're taking into consideration demographics, student characteristics, school characteristics, it's the same when it comes to establishing the thresholds and the cut points for the tool within your respective location. What is consistent for all grade bands is that a cut point is 20 days. If a student at elementary, middle, and high school misses 20 days, that is going to raise a flag. If a student receives 2 or more behavior referrals, and we're talking about a traditional setting here, that's going to raise a red flag. If course performance looks a little bit different based on the threshold, based on the grade band, but when these students hit these thresholds, meaning they are retained, they're not proficient in reading by grade level, it raises a red flag, but it doesn't put a stamp on it. It just says, okay, we have some concerns. Taisha has been retained and she's missed 20 days of school in the current school year. We have to start addressing this early on. She's in high school. She's received multiple D's and F's on her report cards. We need to start doing something about this, and it's okay. It doesn't mean that she's not going to graduate on time, but it does mean this is data for us to intervene. We won't belabor our time here. This is just showing how we can get even granular with setting those cut points at the different, not just by the band, but by the specific grade level. Okay, question came in. Do you recommend that we have cut points, that we associate the cut points only with one? Multiple. You'll have multiple. And that's one, well, I would say this. I would encourage you to let your data drive that decision. But generally, let me go back to, let's see, this slide right here. So if we're talking about middle school, your cut point for attendance would be 20 days. Your behavior cut point will be 2 or more behavior referrals. Your course performance cut points would be failing mathematics, failing English language arts, or that they failed 2 or more courses in any subject, and that does include their electives. And so that may look different if we were looking at elementary students or if we're looking at high school students. But you may even find that from school year to school year that you have had to change those cut points or those thresholds, because it depends on how students have advanced because of the impact of they've advanced because of the interventions. So if your interventions are really working, as we're hopeful that they will, then you should have to change those cut points from year to year. So, and that's part of the entire evaluation process. And that's totally expected and something that you absolutely should do. Hope I got that. Hope I got to what you were asking. If not, let me know. Now I'll try it again. Okay. Let's see. This is, yeah. So some tools are set up differently There is no right or wrong way to the early warning tool. Oftentimes with the tool, you'll see that there are tiered flags, if you will, where a student is maybe if they're coded in red, then that student would be considered attendance failure, and that they are definitely not on the right track. If they fall into maybe a yellow category, and I'm just again talking through this entire slide, not reading in this text. If they're falling into a yellow category, and these colors are just typical colors that we use in the systems, then they're considered in the caution area. I like to call them bubble students. So when you're determining your tool, when you're establishing the threshold, what's important to determine is whether, and I'm going to use some statistical terms here, we're looking at precision versus recall, accuracy, all of those words come into play. Do we want our tool to predict all students and only students that are off track? And that's based on the threshold of the typical ones that I've shown, or whatever is relative to your local school or district. Or do we want to broaden the net and capture students that are bubble students, meaning they're encroaching upon these thresholds, but they're not quite there yet? And that is solely a decision that is made locally based on data, based on resources, based on whatever your SMART goal would be. My experience has always been with looking at those bubble students. I felt, well, based on the environments in which I've worked in, we've definitely had the resources to capture those students as well. But we also just want to make sure that we don't just focus on students that have absolutely just met that failure threshold. Why not capture as many students as we can, prevent them from getting into the failure category, and write the course of those that are in that failure category? So again, it's a local discretion. It's based on resources, your data, and just what the team determines is the best approach. Again, no right or wrong answer to it, but that is important to think through. Do we want to capture students that absolutely meet these characteristics, or do we want those bubble students? And I found that the bubble students, that population really isn't that large, and you just have to be intentional about how you're going to tier your levels. So what is considered a bubble student? What is considered a student who's not a bubble student? What's considered a student that is definitely in that failure caution, that failure category? So data drives all of your decisions. We do have time for a video. Fingers crossed it's gonna work. Or you want to take over, Peter? I think I could do it.
No, it's okay. I was going to say we are coming up with 10 minutes left. I wonder if we
Are
wanted to forego the video, let folks view it afterwards, just to make sure we have time for questions and to wrap up as well.
Peter is amazing. He's on it. I'm just excited. Like, come on, let's go. What's next? Okay, guys, I'll spare you some minutes of a video. Thank you, Peter, for being my eyes on time. Yes, we will hold on this video. I'll tell you what it is. It is a visual artistic representation of everything that we just discussed. If I could draw well and talk and walk and think at the same time, y'all, I would have done this for you, but I found a very nice video on YouTube that kind of sums this up. And I also think that it would help if this will be a turnkey model for you. So this maybe you just start with the video here, presenting it to your team, and then you take them through the presentation as well. So we'll skip over that for a second with the few minutes that we do have. When you get back to your teams, please continue to engage in meaningful conversation. Think about which indicators you will use. Think about what data do we have? What data should we consider based on research? You'll have some of this in the presentation. I also wanted to just point out here that we have also given you additional resources for moving ahead with this work to let you know what other states are doing. And you can look them up as well. So you have some references here. Other questions for you to consider. I will not overwhelm your brain today with trying to think through all of these, but these are questions to take back to your team and you think through and you continue to engage in conversation. Here are some suggestions for continued professional development and why it is important. And then if I had to take just 30 seconds to wrap up everything that we just talked about, I think I can make that happen. So here goes. The very first thing that you're going to do is you're going to establish the right approach for your team, be it district, be it school, be it a mixed approach. And at the school level, is it going to be ad hoc? Is it going to be integrated? Okay, then we're going to identify the right people who needs to be on my dream team or our dream team. I gave you some examples of people that need to be there, your tech people, data, school administrators, interventionists like your counselors. We're going to determine a SMART goal that's based on the data. Where do we get that data from? We've looked at our school, we looked at the district, and we said, what are those 3 areas in attendance, behavior, or course performance that we need to focus on? Then we're going to establish how often should we meet. We're meeting at the beginning of the year, 20 to 30 days in the school year. We're meeting after the grading period and at the end of the year. And then another important step for us to take is to identify accurate indicators. I may have done that in 35 seconds, but thank you for bearing with me. Okay, Peter, I think it is over to you to take us to our next workshop.
Yep, thanks, Taisha. So really quickly, just wanted to highlight that we have another workshop coming up in 2 weeks' time. At the same time, I'm putting the RSVP link in the chat here if you want to access it and sign up. I'll send out an email after we are wrapped up here as well, but just to kind of give you that information there, and you can kind of see the topics on the screen as Taisha did some foreshadowing today. We're going to get into these topics next time round and focus on data to inform intervention. I have another slide, Taisha. Awesome. I know we lost some folks on the way with different commitments. Thanks for staying with us, Sabrina and Nadia. So if you do have a couple of minutes just to share some feedback with us, I'll send this in a follow-up email as well. Very brief survey that helps inform both the next workshop and some other work that we're doing with Vermont Agency of Education. So I appreciate your time and taking that feedback as well. If possible, you can scan that QR code. That'll take you to the feedback form.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Taisha, is there anything else you wanted to wrap up with?
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Are there any questions? First, we appreciate your dropping questions in the chat. You're off mute. Is there anything that you any questions that you have for me?
I don't think I have any questions. I think what I'm thinking about, and I can offer this in the feedback too, is just recommendations around powerful indicators and how to use those indicators and not use those indicators to make decisions. I'm just spending a lot of time thinking about MTSS in general and the work that we have to do around building a coherent MTSS, and spending a lot of time thinking about data that's powerful without being overwhelming, that people can make meaning of, that can be clearly communicated, and that can be easily progress monitored. So that's not a question, but any additional sessions around that, kind of like really digging in to building coherent systems would be great. That's all.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And to be honest, let's see, I think you will get some of that in our next workshop. Because a part of what we're going to do is in that second piece is assigning supports interventions. So actually, we'll go a little bit into that with the intervention planning. So we're going from taking the data in the tool, analyzing, interpreting data, assigning appropriate interventions based on the data, and then touching a little bit on how to evaluate the impact of those interventions. And then, so from the vantage point of a MTSS team or even a PBIS team. So I think you're going to get some of that there, but listening on what you're saying, we'll be sure to, I got you. I got you.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I'm headed out.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.